So, here we are. We're finally at the end of the road, the final season, and you know it's the final season because they bothered to call the game the final season. It seems pretty clear to me it's the final season. Now, when the game was first announced, I didn't really care. I wasn't excited, but I still wanted to play it. Regardless of my feelings on A New Frontier, which I've already talked about at length, I had to see it through until the end. I had to see the conclusion of the series, and as a fan of the series, I was hoping for the best. And what I got was much better than I thought it would be. In fact, I kind of loved it. I'm going to be spoiling shit, so if you haven't played it, I definitely recommend doing that. I've only played the first episode twice, and I enjoyed it both times. On my second playthrough, I of course tried to go the opposite route and choose the other options, which was very beneficial and added a lot to the experience. So, the basic premise is that after a car crash, Clem and AJ, you remember them, are rescued by a group of kids that live in an abandoned boarding school called Erickson Academy.
Allow me to make it formal. Welcome to Erickson's boarding school for troubled youth. You and your boy, feels like you both fit that description.
I'm only just now realizing that this is basically the intro to the first episode of season 1. So yes, immediately this seems familiar, and you're probably already speculating about how it's going to go to shit and everyone will die or end up leaving the school. And while shit does hit the fan, it doesn't do it in the way you expect. But, weirdly enough, while it seems very familiar and samey, it doesn't feel the same, and I think the reason I say that is because of the characters. They're all close to Clementine's age, which I think is a great idea because she's generally always around adults, and so the interactions already feel way more natural because instead of every single adult relying on an 11-year-old, it's just kids talking to one another. It's also something new. We haven't really seen this kind of group in the series, and I do really like the location of a school for this season. For the first time in the series, there are only 4 episodes. Personally, I think this is a good idea. To me, it shows that Telltale don't need to drag things out for a total of 5 episodes. The story they want to tell only requires 4, and that's fine seeing how the 4th episode in most seasons is generally the filler episode, so by just cutting that out entirely, we can hopefully avoid that. I mean, this episode was fairly long and it didn't really feel like there was any filler to me. In fact, if anything, this episode felt like 2 episodes in one. The first half was the setup, as the first episode typically is. It introduced you to all the characters, the location is established, and that's that. But the second half ramps the tension up a shit ton, and there's a massive confrontation, like the end of episode 2 from season 1, season 2, and maybe season 3, but I actually can't remember. Let's talk about the characters. They're actually good. I actually like them. I mentioned in a Steam review, because I did one of those, that the main thing in The Walking Dead is your characters, because the universe is incredibly limited, and as long as you have strong characters, it's not that big an issue. As I said there, the characters are fun, engaging, and likable. Skipping forward a little, we go back to a train station from the beginning of the game with Lewis and Violet, 2 of the new characters. They're actually very good. Lewis you like immediately due to his charm and the fact that he has a chair leg for a weapon and he calls it Cheryl's.
Oh, this? It's a chair leg. I call it Cheryl's.
I already like Lewis a lot, and given how he has this confident demeanor but is really a bit of a coward, I hope that he has an arc of some sort and becomes more courageous while still being the funny guy that he is. And Violet comes around pretty quickly after Clem proves herself and a romantic relationship is obviously hinted at. This probably means you'll be able to romance her or Lewis. Honestly, I'll probably do neither of those things. It's nothing exceptional, but it's definitely a step above A New Frontier. So, we got the supplies we went there for, but some guy called Abel shows up. I didn't notice it myself, but Clem mentions that he had different colored eyes, so I guess that's their version of the brand from A New Frontier. I chose to let him leave with some of the food, so when he inevitably comes back, I will be in the minority of people that didn't try to fucking kill him. But one of the characters back at the base, Brody, worries about it. My initial thought was that she is overreacting, but no, she really wasn't. This is all important stuff, because later, Brody and Marlon are arguing in the basement and it wakes Clem up. At this point, I was actually really nervous, and the situation was incredibly intense. We find out that 10's sisters, Sophie and Minerva, were traded to the same raiders for the others' safety. 10 is another character who is pretty good but somewhat stuck in his own world and will probably end up dying as a result of being oblivious and unprepared. Anyways, Marlon in his frustration hits Brody with the flashlight, accidentally killing her. He then locks Clem in the basement and we have to fight off Brody as she of course turns. This sequence is really good. The noises that she makes as you hear her turn are genuinely horrifying, and it's actually pretty scary stuff. And I love how the flashlight turns red as it becomes covered in her blood. Once we get out, shit gets very real and Marlon tries to pin on us that we killed Brody when that obviously didn't happen. And guess what else? He was planning on trading Clem and AJ. What the fuck? But, knowing now what Marlon ends up doing, it makes a lot more sense why he bothered to help save Clem and AJ in the first place, since he says he was going to give them away too. Or rather, Brody does. In little moments in his mannerisms, there are certain lines of dialogue hint at this, like how he says he needs them home in one piece, or that they could help feed more mouths. Stuff like that you wouldn't think twice about. Things like that, as well as Brody's outburst after finding out someone sabotaged the traps, makes it all a bit clearer as to what is going on. This is really intense stuff. Part of me feels bad for Marlon because he did genuinely want to protect them, but he also traded his own people for that protection. Similar to Ben in episode 3, how he gave the bandits supplies.
Everyone's counting on me to step up. Be the leader they need me to be. I really want to be that for them.
You're given the option to keep him prisoner, let him stay, or let him leave. I chose to let him leave, but oh no, AJ fucking kills him. AJ, the little kid, really seriously did not see any of that coming. Just when you think Marlon can be reasoned with and we can solve this in a peaceful way, he's just dead. Everything progressed in a natural way, it all made sense to me, and I understand why what happened, happened. And unlike that of Mariana's death in the first episode of A New Frontier, hopefully this event will actually make the characters grow and change in some way that feels meaningful. But in saying that, that's one of the things I'm somewhat conflicted on, their decision to hastily kill off Marlon when they could have easily dragged this out until episode 2. This is a catch-22 situation to me, assuming I'm using that term correctly, because on the one hand, I love that they got this out of the way in the first episode because it tells me that Telltale are confident with their story and it was a legitimate surprise. But I also really would have liked more time to get to know Marlon and Brody specifically, seeing how she kinda dies abruptly. Not to say her death wasn't good, it was very good, and the following sequence where you're trying to find the flashlight and then you have to kill Brody and then the whole confrontation with Marlon, it was great. It was great. It just didn't feel like the sort of thing you do in the very first episode with characters you've only just met. Marlon even comments on that.
You have to believe me.
You don't! You met her like 2 days ago!
And so part of me worries that this could be a sign that Telltale have figuratively blown their load too quickly. Really, it could go either way, but ultimately, I do enjoy the choice of having this all take place in the first episode. I'm interested to see where this event takes the characters and how they do hint at these raiders. And speaking of them, we only saw them once and it was only one guy. That is really great, because now we know they're a threat, so there's still this looming tension, but as well as that, it establishes the main group we're going up against while allowing the current conflict to play out uninterrupted. We know the raiders are out there and are a threat, but right now, it doesn't matter. It's not important. It's a really weird detail, but it's something I appreciated. The game focused on the right thing, the characters. And seeing how Marlon was actually the best character in this episode, I felt so conflicted about it and was emotional when he died. I haven't felt that with this series in years. Yes, he did terrible things, but he's also the reason that Clem and AJ even survived. There's a lot to his character, and I am somewhat disappointed that he died. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in my video on A New Frontier, but the walkers are actually kind of scary again. I'd say that really ever since season 2, the walkers just haven't been that intimidating. They're just kind of always there, but you don't really worry about them too much, and I guess that does make sense since they've survived for this long and you generally have to worry about the living more than the dead. In this game, the episode opens with a genuinely intense sequence in which Clem and AJ have to fight their way back to a car and get the car keys that are stuck in a walker's eyes. So already, in the first 15 or so minutes, there is some actual tension. And this is good, because later in the episode you go back to that same place with some other characters and it makes things scarier knowing that there are walkers around. And another reason the walkers feel scarier is because the gameplay has been tweaked heavily, so you actually have a third person perspective, and you die immediately if you make a mistake. This took a little while to get used to at first, it's very different for this sort of game, but I do like the change. The scene right before all of this though, the first scene in the game, is also really great and does a very good job of immediately establishing AJ. I like AJ a lot. He acts like a kid would, but he's clearly matured in the little time he spent with Clem, and he's like high-key a fucking psychopath. Clem and AJ's relationship feels natural and is a highlight of the first episode, with a lot of your choices impacting him and what he does, much like that of Lee and Clementine. A major example being how he ends up shooting Marlon and then repeats whatever line you said to him at the beginning of the game. That was a bit disturbing, I won't lie.
Always aim for the head. I aimed for the head.
And I don't really know why, but Clementine feels a lot more likable in this game. I liked her in A New Frontier, obviously, but there was something about her that just bugged me. Clementine in this season already feels a lot more like the Clementine that I know. There are also now collectibles that you can put up around your room at the boarding school. This is a nice touch, but it's not a massive deal. But this does offer the game some replay value, as you have to take alternate story paths and do certain things for achievements, as well as picking up collectibles you may have missed. After getting all the achievements in just the first episode, I had already spent 7 hours playing it, and I really enjoyed all of those hours. Also, I would highly recommend that if you haven't already, you replay the episode. On my first playthrough, I went hunting with Lewis and a sim, but I think that story-wise, the fishing one is a lot more beneficial in making you care about Brody before she dies, and also makes sense with why you try and get Violet to help you later, because her and Minnie were in a relationship. And so with all that said, there is of course one more thing to address: the choices. Now, people have been rather critical of Telltale and how their games don't really change and the choices don't really matter, and as far as this season goes, well, it's only the first episode. I can't really determine whether or not it's changed or if things would have been drastically different depending on your choices, but I will say some of the choices were tough, specifically the, I guess, non-choice of what to say to Marlon. Some of the choices were also really bizarre, like letting AJ sleep on the floor or convincing him to sleep on the bed. I doubt something like this is going to come back as a major plot point, but we'll have to wait and see. There's also a section in Done Running, that's the name of the episode by the way, where Clem, Lewis, Marlon and Violet play a card game and whoever gets the highest card gets to ask Clem a question. I like this section a lot. It's one of the best parts of the episode and felt like a much more natural way of bringing up Lee or Kenny than whatever was in A New Frontier. I'm seeing now on YouTube that as well as Lee and Kenny, you can also talk about Javier and Gabe. Lewis asks if Clem ever had a boyfriend and you can respond however you want. I responded by saying he was a dork or something, which Lewis inferred as Clem being majorly in love with him. I thought the game was referring to Duck, but I realize now that they meant Gabe, and if that doesn't show how forgettable the characters in A New Frontier were, then I don't know what will, because I completely forgot about him while playing. Didn't forget Lee though, didn't forget Kenny or Luke, just saying. And this is coming from me, I have a pretty good memory with these things, and I completely forgot about one of the main characters of the previous game. Really, I don't know what else to say other than I'm surprised. I haven't been this excited about The Walking Dead in years, and I'm so glad to see that I'm not alone in saying that, as the game has an overwhelmingly positive review score. That just makes me happy, seeing that Telltale have managed to do it again, and I do have faith in them for the next 3 episodes. My only genuine criticism of the episode is that it felt a little rushed and the pacing was pretty slow, as I mentioned. They could have dragged some of the stuff to episode 2 because a lot happened in the first episode. It worries me slightly, as it may mean the later episodes run out of gas, but the fact they've started so strong does make me pretty comfortable. I've said before that the heart and soul of this series is Clementine, so making the final season her story was definitely the right decision, and I feel like this is the story they wanted to tell but just couldn't with A New Frontier, seeing how I basically just view that game as filler until this one, which I said in my video. Things are now back on track with the story they want to tell. A New Frontier was just an unnecessary diversion. It's probably too early to say, and I'm most definitely overhyping this, but if the season continues to improve in quality and writing and just general improvements, it may actually rival that of season 1, which is saying a lot. So yeah, I kind of fucking love this episode. As far as my thoughts on where the story will go, I feel like there's a possibility that Lily and or Krista could make a return, since we never actually saw them die, and for all we know they could be alive. But if it's just going to be another Kenny returns with no explanation, I'd rather not. Though seeing how the decision to either leave Lily or let her stay is shown in the intro as a big deal, maybe there's a chance that depending on your choice you may be able to convince her to help you, assuming she is with this other group. Really, I have no idea, and I can't be bothered speculating only to end up being wrong and wasting my time. So yeah, I don't really have a clue what will happen, and I'm glad. I really hope that the characters from A New Frontier don't return to help us against the Raiders or whatever though. I'd rather just not see them again. Apologies for my all over the place thoughts and what have you, but that's basically all I have to say. It's been 8 months now since my last video, which is insane. During that time, I've realized that my best videos are the ones in which I actually have something to say. For example, my video on Uncharted 4, while incredibly messy and a lot of what I said was invalid, unfair, and probably not accurate to my opinions now, I did have an argument to make, or at least something to say. Compare that to my video on Drake's Fortune, where I really didn't have a lot to say and I was mostly just making it because it was the 10th anniversary. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, don't expect a lot of videos or for this channel to be a constant thing that I do, because it won't be. When I feel like making a video, I'll do that. And it just so happens, I am working on another one right now, quite possibly my biggest one yet. All I can say is that it's about Star Wars, and that it's been in my head ever since The Force Awakens came out. So if you like Star Wars, then that's great. See you when I see you.